In the time before there were trains and cars and planes, when people had to make long journeys, it would often take a couple of days to get from one place to the other. But it was known at that time and accepted that if in the middle of your journey night fell, you could knock on any door, ask for hospitality and be pretty sure you'd be given it. A space by the fireside to sleep, a bit of something to eat to keep you going along. And so it was, there was this lady, an elderly lady who had a long journey to make. She had walked all day, she was dusty, she was cold, she was tired, and she came to a village and she thought, great, a village here, there's more than one house, I'll surely find a place to spend the night out of the cold and out of the elements. And she knocked on the first door and the first door opened and they looked her up and down and she asked for a place to stay and they said no and shut the door. It was a little surprise. She went to the next door, knocked on the door, they opened it a bit, they looked her up and down and they shut the door again. And so it was in every house in the village. Nobody would let her in. And she was very disappointed. So she found a little bench in the village and she laid herself down under the stars and wrapped herself up as warm as she could and prepared to go to sleep. And just as she was settling down, she saw a young man come into the village and he was dressed in a long travelling cloak that was dusty and dirty and clear he'd been travelling for a long time too and was the same as herself, looking for some place to spend the night. And he went to knock on the first door and she called to him, don't bother, there's no welcome here for travellers. And he nodded to her, but he went and knocked on the door anyway. And the door opened a little bit and they looked him up and down and then the door opened wide and they brought him inside. And she thought, what's going on here? Why was I turned away? Short time later, he came out and he came down to the old woman and he said, come with me. And he said, there's no welcome for me. And he said, come with me, there'll be a welcome when you're with me. And he wrapped his cloak around her because she was shivering a bit in the cold. And they went up to the door and knocked on it. And again, the door opened, looked at the two of them, opened wide and brought them inside. You see, that old woman was truth. And very often we don't welcome truth and we don't want to know truth. And the young man was story. And we all like a good story. And when truth comes wrapped up in a good story, we're much more likely to welcome it.